Hi, and welcome to another Rigonomicon.com video. Today we're going to be talking about something that's actually very important. Well, that's if you care about quality. The subject today will be about volume preservation for your character in particular. Some people mistake this as just a Skinner's job and just a problem for Skinners. But this is something that everybody should be aware of, and working together that is involved with character, any form of character creation or development. So character modelers are included here, skinning, rigging in general, and of course animators. Everybody involved within those jobs should be very much involved in how it's being handled. The overall quality of your character will be determined sometimes by this factor. So I've worked with some pretty amazing people. I'm just going to say his first name to, I don't know, I guess anonymity. Like, for example, I worked with someone named Rod, and Rod is a very he's a perfectionist, but in the best way. And I hope that you end up working with people that are also perfectionists that will want to improve the quality of your character, be it through the acting or through how it looks and how it moves and how it's rigged. And this video is actually an incredibly important one because I'm going to go through some things that you can do in order to improve that result. One of the things I'm going to say right off the bat is you want to avoid getting stuck with recipes and any, like, there's a lot of places that sell you these kind of setups where you press a button and it does stuff. You want to avoid that kind of thing, and you want to keep being critical about what you're doing and improve the methods as you go. And I'm going to show you a real world asset that was made for a game, so keep in mind what we were aiming for, and I'll show you what kind of solutions we came up with and why it was important. So because the Rigonomicon is designed to help deepen understanding of rigging, but at the same time we're trying to build a, like a toolbox for you to be able to use at any time with some understanding of what those tools are doing, and not just some blank button that you just press and then you become dependent on it. I am going to start with an actual problem that I got from one of my students that asked me about this. So here's a character that I've actually stripped away a lot of it. I guess, again, anonymity. I don't know if my student wants to hide this. I mean, it's a work in progress, and I think it's actually a very good work in progress. There's a lot of good that's in the rig that they had. They were horrified to find out that after doing their work, their characters seemed to display the ability to have cup holders for knees. And they were like, well, this is awful. How do I solve this? And they didn't really have a method or an idea of how to fix this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to set a few keys here, hit a few poses, and then little by little, we're going to solve this problem. I'm going to put up on the screen now a list, and they're specifically in an order of which you should use. At least this is from my experience. I found that these are the things that affect your end result the most. Your pivots are absolutely number one. Your skin weights aren't even a thing until you know where the pivots are and what joints are there. So those two are going to be primarily the ones you want to focus on, especially in the early stages. But then you're going to probably hit the problem with linear skinning. And I'm going to show you, things that are very common for solving this problem. Now, I want to get this out of the way right away. If I go into the skin bind tool, we have different methods, right? We have linear, we have dual quaternion, and then we have another one called weighted blended. So some people will guide you to using dual quaternion for skinning. And even though we love quaternions here at Rigonomicon, I would strongly recommend not using this for a number of reasons. First one, dual quaternion will get you one step forward and 10 steps back. You're going to find that a lot of things break the second that you start using dual quaternion, exclusively at the very least. By its own admission, you want to have the weight blend version, which is basically blending between these two. So it's yet another mask on top of your character that basically negotiates which one of these two is actually being used. So you'd use dual quaternion for knees and elbows and things that give you trouble. It's still not going to solve a lot of anatomical issues, but it's going to solve at least the skinning issue, anything that's related to skinning. So that mindset already is a bad mindset, because you're starting to think of dual quaternion as the button to solve problems with skinning, and it's not a question of that. This process that we're going to be doing is more of an understanding of anatomy, and sometimes it's going to be a linear skin problem, which we will solve in ways that ends up as a classic linear skin. So if you're using an engine, a game engine, you're going to notice that dual quaternion never shows up in a game engine, because first of all, it's not optimal to have two systems fighting each other or having some other system that blends between the two. You're adding complexity to drawing that frame, and that's you're going to have to trade for something else. Maybe this dual quaternion is trading for something that's more useful to the player. So now I'm going to. So hopefully we're not going to talk about this too much. The best way I can sum it up is you're paying a lot for really just macaroni. Because at the end of the day, that's the kind of deformation you're going to get out of dual quaternion. It's really nice looking macaroni for elbows. It's not necessarily going to be looking all that great, but at least the volume issue is solved, right? But that's not what we're trying to solve necessarily. We're trying to volume preserve, and also we're trying to do some sculpting or anatomy preservation. Okay, so if I'm going to add some keys here so we can hit a few poses and then see if we can get our systems to work with those poses. My cat has decided to use his tail to flick my mouse around. Hang on a second. Let me just move that out of the way. Huh? You comfy? Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is I've selected these three objects. I'm going to go to the first frame. I'm not a big fan of just pressing S. I like doing Shift W and Shift E to set keys on the things that I will animate. It's never a good thing to just add keys to everything. So now that they're there, at least this part's going to be automated. We can see the problem again, and I'm going to just rotate these that way and bring them up like so. And this is a pose that is believable. Like you'd want to have a pose like this where the character, maybe the toes would be curled, but for the sake of what we're doing here, this isn't so great. I mean, this is good enough, but even if it's not so great, it's fine. So now if we look at the animation, it's blending between those two frames, and that's all we need to be able to work on this. Okay, so we're going to go through the list simply. We got pivots first. So pivots are the first thing that we're going to affect. Okay, if I go to the skin and move skin joints, you know what? I'm going to do it just for the sake of showing you. Now, there's a couple of issues with, there's the IK that's already active. So that's a bit of that's not going to work well with this tool. So this tool is supposed to allow you to move a pivot, and then you go to anything else and it pops out, right? It's all good, right? And then when you check it, oh, what was that? Why did it pop? So that's a bit of an issue. So sometimes what you have to do is delete the, so I'm just going to undo, and we should be back to normal now. Let's see. Yep. Okay. All right. So we're back to our cup holder scenario, and nothing broke. Okay. So by using that tool, unfortunately, it doesn't play well with the fact that we have IK active already. So I'm going to show you an alternative, which is unfortunate because I'm using the same base tools as that one we just used that comes with Maya. If you select the mesh and you just go into skin here and you just go deactivate, and then when you're in translation, you want to preserve children so it doesn't affect anything else. This actually works better, unfortunately, works better than the tool that comes with Maya. So hopefully you can do exactly what I'm doing. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is you don't want to make this completely straight. So if you really want to have that curve, like a curvature that points correctly, you might want to consider moving the top part, but it's already pretty far back, so This is one of those things where the model is in a way where it's tough to get a leg to have that nice curvature. So what curvature am I talking about? It's very simple. If I go like this is an exaggeration of what these bones should be pointing in. The more it's like this, the better. If you have even the slightest of this kind of curvature from the front view, it means you're telling the IK that this might be the direction that your knee has to go. My student was very careful, and they made it pretty good for it for the IK to find its way. When we're moving things, we're affecting that. So if I were to recreate the IK and add the pole, even adding the pole vector, it may have some more difficulty this time. Then I can close this, and you're going to find that with what we've done now, if I reactivate the skin, because I didn't go full straight, activate. Sometimes you're going to get some visual updates that are weird. Don't worry, when you reactivate the skin, all of that's going to be fixed. You'll notice that there's no issue like what we had with the other one. So it's unfortunate that the Maya tool doesn't work the way we want it. Okay, so let's see, after all of that, let's see what we got as a result. So we have improved the scenario. We've gone from cup holders to melted cheese. So that's an improvement. But now I think because of the way the mesh is posed, I think because of the way Maya's IK is very much dependent on that angle that we were talking about, I think that's about as good as, well, there is one thing we could do, which is lower the pivot, because the pivot is pretty high up. We'll talk about that later. But I want to preserve the intention of my student, and I want to preserve their intention as much as possible without I just want to fix the problem and give them the tools to be able then to adjust. So what we're going to do next is just go down the list. We've done pivots. Now let's go to skin weights. So easy enough. You just press that button, double click, and here we are. If you're having trouble finding the bone, just right click on the bone itself and then go select influence. Now, if we look at the actual pose, let's go to a pose where we can see the problem starting to emerge, but we still have access to vertices. Sometimes this happens when you're moving around the time you go into a different frame. Maya's tool kind of wigs out, so I'm gonna just switch, and it will refresh the tool. So I'm gonna make that a little bit smaller, and I'm going to go into replace, and I'm gonna make sure that I don't have more, like already 0.2 is more than enough, even if I'm using a Wacom tablet with pen pressure. What we're going to do is we're going to start like this and see, are we making it better or worse? And the answer is we're making it worse, because we're bringing more of the vertices from the top, and it's like our melted cheese is now even meltier. So that means that we need to go to the thigh instead of the calf, and then bring it up, counter that melted cheese effect, and just start bringing these up like so, trying to find that sweet spot for the shape of the topology. So making sure our loops are starting to make sense. Maybe make this a little. This needs a little bit more love than the other part, and we keep doing that. And then eventually we will start to see some volume return. So there is going to be a point where we can't go any further, and that's going to be the end of what we can do. And now we're going to go to another stage now, but I'm just going to keep doing this a little bit. And I just want to see if I can bring this curvature. Always trying to see if I can be careful with that curve. We're going to fix that a little bit with smoothing in just a second. We're going to do this in as smart as possible. Oh, there we're starting to have problems there. And I'm just going to try maybe a bigger brush so I can do that kind of thing, and that'll be better. Okay, so with that, I think with a bit of smoothing, that should fix that problem. So if I right-click on the thigh and say select vertices, I can set myself to smooth with 100% effect, and then click the flood button. It's going to, by right-clicking and selecting the vertices, it's only going to show me the vertices that have been painted. And by going to 100% and just flooding, it's just these vertices that are going to smooth out. You're going to see that the little issue that we had before is going away. So this, we're getting pretty close to, there's still some skinning issues. There's probably some influence from some other things that shouldn't be there. We'd have to go through all the vertices and all the bones and make sure that like things like this are fixed. But let's say that for now, this is like we could keep working although there's some stray influences here and there, but for the most part you're going to find that it's not going to get that much better as far as volume and anatomy preservation goes. So if you look, you still got a little bit of the front. Now it's no longer melted cheese. Now it just looks like someone took a pillow and bent it or folded it. So it's still not quite right. So I'm just going to save where we are right now. I'm going to call this whip 2. Okay, so this is my work in progress. You can name it whatever you want. It's fine. This is at least where we're getting somewhere. So the next, before we get to the next section, which is the volume joints, to see if we can use that, we want to understand why pivots and skin weights hasn't fixed the problem. And again, this goes back to what we were talking about before. Oh yeah, before I forget, let me remove the preserve children's option before I close that window. But always keep that in mind. If some weird thing starts happening, chances are you forgot to turn off the preserved children option. Okay, so this has been saved. Now I'm going to open up a file, and I encourage you to do this yourself as often as you can. As often as you can. Whenever you're presented with a problem and your understanding isn't complete, make a little file like this one that isolates all of the variables, so that way the issue is only what you're trying to solve is what you're going to be seeing in this file. So and then you'll have a better understanding of what's going on. And then the problems that you're going to have while in this file are going to be laser focused on that issue. Okay, so what I have here is very simply put a cylinder that has been I cut it like almost like one of those sippy straws, so that's where the bend is going to happen. This is the bend. The rest we don't really care. And I only added 2 joints. Like one of the problems we had before was that maybe there was influences from other joints. We don't know. You'd have to go through it and do some cleanup. But here, there's no way around it. These are the joints that we have. Point final. So now what I did is I set that up and did a basic skin, so we can do the sippy cup kind of, or the little box of the fruit drink box. Straw, and I also animated it so that it continues 180, so we can see the problem at its maximum. And no matter how you skin it, you never fix this problem. So this is a perfect file where we have pivots that could be adjusted to improve, but you'll never, that the issue at hand isn't going to really get fixed. And I made it so that each frame is actually the angle of this. So if I go to frame 90, this is 90 degrees. And I also made it so that if you go to 180, well, it doesn't go to 180, it goes to 179 point something. It gives you this. Now, the thing that I want to point out is this side. Like here's the origin. Look on this side of our grid. You're going to notice that basically all of the volume that we lost is from that side. And when we bend this way, we lost it completely. All right, so I'm going to do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set something up so we can see what is causing that issue. And it has to do, in this case, it has to do with linear skin. So I'm going to just create a locator that has the X-ray mode on it. And I'm going to just press V and snap it to a vertice that's in the middle, but not on the edge. It's just like at the top of the mesh, so we can understand this. This represents now that vertice right there that's in the middle. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to shift select the first joint and press P. And by pressing P now, it is child of that. and it's become its parent. And I'm going to select again and press Control D. Now it's made a duplicate of it, and I'm going to make that one child of the one in the front by pressing P again. So now we should have something that looks like this. This is very important because basically what I'm doing here is I'm showing you if this vertice that was right at the beginning here was skinned 100% to this joint, it's parented, right? It's the equivalent of saying I want to parent this vertice to this joint if you put a skin weight of 100%. So that goes for the other one too. So because I want to see what the result of what would happen if it was 100% on the other one, it shows me this. Now the fun part here is if I select these two and I go shape, I'm going to add a line between the two, and to make it a little easier, I'll get rid of its invisibility. So now we can see a line. Hopefully you can see it clearly. You can see a line being drawn. And the vertice that we were looking at is always going to be at 50% between this line. It's going to be in the middle of the line all the time because I skinned this vertice to be 50% at one bone and 50% of the other. And here's the linear blend between the 2 points. All right. It's not doing like as if it was a child of its own and it's a 50% like transform blend. It's not that. What it's doing is it's doing a linear blend between 100% of each bone. So just think of it this way. It's doing it. That line represents the only places where with 2 bones, we can actually get the vertice to go to. If I add more influence to the first bone, it's going to just travel along that line closer to the other one. And this line, if we look at the end frames, looks like this. So there's absolutely no way you could get the vertice to get onto this side. This is a very important thing. So one of the other things that we're going to talk about is we're going to start talking about one of the volume preservation nodes that can help us. Because, and this is something that's very handy, we're going to talk about a blend node. And a blend nodes are just kind of like average nodes as well. You can call them that if you want. It's going to create a third option. And instead of a single line, we're going to have a triangle. So I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so it doesn't bother us. I'm just going to make this so that it's about that big so we can see the line clearly. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another joint. And this one, I'm going to make it so it looks like something else, like instead of a locator, it's going to look like, I don't know, a sphere. Yeah, okay, so we're going to make it a sphere. And the sphere is going to have, I'm going to change the shape's scale. Don't worry, the object scale doesn't change. This is just the shape. So the shape size on the, I guess, the z-axis is going to change. So I just want to see it so that as it spins, I can tell, whoops, sorry about that. I can tell in what direction it's pointing, and that's all I'm doing. And maybe I might make the X a little bit smaller, something like that. And that way we can see where that sphere is. And all we're going to do with this thing is I'm going to, not select the mesh, select this. I'm going to select first the 2 joints, and then this object. And I'm going to use the default Maya setup, which I want to show you multiple methods on how you can do this. But I'm going to use the constrain, orient constrain. You do not want to maintain the offset. You want it to do a pure blend of the transforms. Okay, and now it should be an average between the 2. That's what happens when you have more than one object being selected for the constraint. So it's based on the order. So if you've ever wondered why Maya is different than every other software in the world, where you usually select the thing that you want to control and then the objects that are going to control it, this is why. Because Maya's viewport is done in such a way that the last thing that you selected gets a different color. You'll notice that as I select things, they become that really bright teal, whereas everything else is white. It's showing you what the last one was. And that's important because you're basically saying, I'm selecting these 2 objects, and it's going to affect this one. And that's the visual language and order in which you should remember that when you're inside of Maya. So this joint now is, again, I can't stress this enough. This is there's nothing special about this joint. It hasn't been scaled or anything. It's just visually like this. And it's a blend between those two. And you can control that percentage by simply selecting the object. And there should be a somewhere in here, they should have thrown in, when you do the constraint, it usually adds, I don't see it, but normally there's a percentage control, so that you can say how much of a percentage there is going from one to the other. For whatever reason, I think the joint orient didn't come along with the blending value, which is strange. I'll have to look into that. Anyways, not important right now. What's important is we have the blend node, and now we can make it point to the 50%, basically. Like, one of the things you're going to notice is it's always pointing in that direction. Now, if we take one of these and duplicate them, and then parent it to this object, we're going to see that it creates a third option. Now I'm going to make it draw the triangle by just doing this and doing this. And then I'm going to select this, this, and this. Oh, they're both here. Okay, so I'm going to do 1 and 1. This is just to make the line visible. I'm just trying to show you the triangle. So as you rotate, you now have this area where the vertice could go. So if we add this object, so we're going to need to start naming a few things because it's getting kind of ugly. This object should be a child of something. So let's parent it to this object. Okay, so now this object, we need to give it a name. We're going to call this maybe hinge or knee or elbow, whatever you want. As long as you understand what it is, like this object should be called maybe thigh. This would be the calf. We really don't care about the joint 3. That's the nub that's on the other end. These bacon joints are just references. We don't care. Knee is important because we're going to add this to the skinning solution. So all we do is you select that, then shift select. Oh, all right. I turned off the ability to select meshes. Then shift select the mesh and go into skin. We're going to go edit influences and go add influence with the option, and make sure everything's set to the lowest possible thing, because if you don't, it's going to kind of do like this volume and then affect your skin. We don't want it to touch anything, and we're going to even lock it too. So it's going to do no harm is basically what we're trying to do. We're trying to include it without affecting everything that we added. And now we should have something called knee here. And now we can unlock it. We know that it came in safely. And we can just go to a frame that we like. And we're going to see if what I just told you is true or not. So if I go like this, that is far away from that line. So that would be great if we could use that. So let's give it a shot. Once again, we have that little bug. I'm going to make this brush really small so I can paint things to my heart's delight. And I'm going to leave it on 1. And it's okay. So sometimes this happens. You have to deselect it. Go back to this, and now I should be able to paint. It's not letting me. I see. It's because I'm on smooth. It's my brain that's smooth for doing that move. Okay, so now I should be able to do this, and I painted pretty strongly, and you'll notice that it is indeed going to that point. It's capable of making it, because remember, it's this vertex right here. If I go 100%, it will hit that point. See? And if I check the animation, it's effectively following that point. Like that little vertice, like that one that we've been using as a reference, is following that exact point when it's at 100%. So this is a good way to understand how skin weights work. Having these lines show up and have these objects 100% be equivalent to a 100% skin weight through parenting will help us understand what's going on and what we can do. So with that in mind, because this is a little different than what we did, we could do something like this, maybe go crazy, and then use that other trick I showed you, something like that. not too much of the middle part, and then you can right click here and go select vertices. Now we can use smooth. Okay, so basically this is good. Now at this point, what I would probably do, and this is how the selection thing works. I wish I could just unselect stuff. Unlock select, no. Yeah, so what I'm trying to avoid here is that I want to be able to keep painting. And unfortunately, it would only allow me to paint on things that are selected. So I would do this and then come back and it's gone, right? So that's a bit of a problem with the interface for this thing. I wish there was, if you know a way of doing that, by all means, let me know in the comments. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower this, no more than 0.2 at the very most. And then I'll be able to do this kind of thing. And then slowly get my shape. And this is something that you should do, bearing in mind the anatomy of your character. If it's a knee, it's different than that. It's not going to be like what we're doing here is more like a straw that's bent. And we do some more work on smoothing it out. Now, one thing you want to avoid is doing the bulbous effect, where it kind of like does this thing where it looks like a light bulb. You want to very much see, I already see that light bulb effect just a little bit. And we're going to fix that now in just a second. But I thought it would be interesting if I opened up this file and I showed you this. Now, I don't like to poo-poo on other people's work, but I want to show this because this is one of those scenarios where this is important to talk about. Because if you're one of my students, for example, you've been encouraged to use this system. And if you look at this video, you're going to understand where I'm coming from. So I'm just going to play it.
And it's done. Okay, now let's have a look at the deformation. I'm going to zoom in on the top. And look at that. How nice is that? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go.
Yeah, not nice actually. So this is not, there's no anatomy in this, and maybe they're going to be affecting it. But this, you're going to notice they have these joints that are basically very similar. They're trying to bring, they're using points of reference to get it to do that, and that's quite ugly, unfortunately. The reason why I bring this up is because, well, this is a good example of that bulbous effect that we're trying to avoid. This looks like a knee that's been, or an elbow rather, that's been stung by a bee. It's very swollen, but also consider this little menu here. Well, it's not so little, there's a lot of things. These are all the tools you need in order to set this kind of stuff up. So here's the thing, this is where I want to talk about for value for my students. If you are someone who has taken the time to learn all of these tools first and didn't do this like the more quote unquote manual way, if you didn't learn what the manual process is, how do you know this is actually better or faster? In fact, you're almost guaranteed to be slower because of this. You have to learn how this system works before you can actually use it, right? So my proposition for my students is that learn how to do it manually, find solutions for the problems that you're going to hit, and then these tools might be useful for you. But the fact, like in the case of this is advanced skeleton. In the case of advanced skeleton, you have some issues with this software that has to do with money. They're selling you a product that, yes, it's free for students, but that's actually going to work against you. Because if you start working in a company and you've learned this system, then you are dependent on the tools and things that are in this system. That's not good. That's actually quite terrible. So to be in that position, because if you want to use it in that workplace, you have to ask to have it purchased. And that's not going to be free. It's actually quite expensive. It's almost as expensive as Maya. So keep that in mind. That you're putting yourself at risk by using or learning something like this. And if you're thinking, oh, I'm an animator, I don't need to worry about that. Well, guess what? There's a lot of systems that are built into this that may not be similar to the ones you're using in that workplace. They may have another system that's very different. And because you don't have the building blocks of how this was put together, you might not be able to adapt so easily. So there's a lot of negatives to learning a system like this one. It might get you to the finish line faster. If you're an environment artist and you just want to have some characters in your your final film, and this is a quick way of doing it. I don't know how this is a quick way of doing it, but that might be a scenario where that could work. So maybe. And it's always good to learn how this stuff works. But my suggestion to you, and I know I'm spending a little bit of time on this, my suggestion here is to learn how to do it manually, learn why you have these problems, or where and learn how to solve your problems. One last thing I want to mention: if for whatever reason you decide to, maybe later on, you want to be an artist that creates rigs and sells your animation to people, and you need to make a rig, basically. Let's say you're not even selling the rig, you're just selling animation, but you want to put it on your own, on a rig that you can animate. That is a difficult proposition to make if you have to pay money. At that point, you can't use the free version. So you'd have to pay money to have this, and that adds cost to the product that you're making. So even if you're an outsourcee or someone that does stuff on the side, you'll find that if you want to do it legit, it's adding dollars and cents to your final product that you're not going to see. All right, so enough about that. I just wanted to mention that you need to develop your own your eye for anatomy and see that this is awful. So you would have to really work that out. Here, we're still not in the clear either, but at least we're working on it, and we're trying to see what kind of systems we can put in here to make it better. So the other one that we're going to add, and we don't even need to add any more joints. We already have the joint that we wanted, which is right here. If I could just select it. Okay, so that's the one we want. I'm going to add something called a poke, a poke effect. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to, as this bends, it's going to push it out. Okay, and by doing that, by pushing outward as this bends, it means that it's almost adaptive, because when it's flat like this, it'll stay flat, and as you go here, this is already starting to bother me. But as you start to get to this, it's pushing that way, and it's bringing that volume back out. So all we're going to do is the same thing as before, like to be able to do the blend, and because I could just turn that off and then shift. Select that, so we know that this is the last thing I selected. In the constraint menu, it's gotten a lot bigger, and I'll keep adding stuff, but now you have a poke constraint, and you just click that on, and now we're going to see what it did. Just by doing that, you're going to notice that now you have a translation as on top of, so it's pushing it out that way. So we have to work on this now to make sure that it bends in the right way. So how do we do that? So if we look at the poke knee, it's starting at 0 and going to 90. So the first thing we're going to do is set that to 135 degrees, and we're going to set that to start at 45, something like that. So basically what it does is it's not doing any poke, and then as it hits 45 degrees between those two joints, it's going to start pushing it outward. And maybe that's a bit too much. So then we can dial that in a little bit and say a little bit less of that. So this is where you can see what the end result looks like. So by doing this, we've essentially gotten that space back that's over there. So as far as these two go, like, we could put it so that it's a little stronger here, smooth that out so that when we're at these frames around here, there's less here and more on the top part. We can keep working on it until it looks right. And all you're doing at this point is just adjusting that value that we just saw, and also the skin weights. So at this point, you're going in here, and you're saying, okay, we want a little less of an effect here. Right? We're on replace with not much of an effect there. So something like that. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. Get rid of that bulbous effect. And let's say if we wanted a really tight elbow, you'd start going in that direction. And then, you could smooth this out. And then let's say when we get to this, maybe we can increase the one that does have a weight. We can increase that. And remember, this is the nightmare scenario. So we should be looking at about there. This is what we should be looking at, and try to solve this problem, because this is, anatomically speaking, if this was a leg, you started to lose the volume around here. That's 45 degrees. And then you got to this one, and that's about as far as the leg would go, because the calf would then be hitting the thigh. And you could also add another poke bone here that pushes forward when you're at these angles, so that it makes the calf muscle actually push the mass forward. And these are things I've done in the past. They work. These are good methods. I'm just gonna, it's really bothering me. I'm just gonna select vertices and smooth that out. There we go. Okay, maybe a little more. There you go. So something like this already is preserving the volume, and depending on your anatomy, you would adjust so that it looks right. So you want to be very conscious of that. Like if you're going to be going further than this, then you have to consider the rest of the anatomy, and how is that possible? The mass is now overlapping. Something would, in reality, something would have to change. Okay, so for the case of this, like we've learned all we can from this test scene, except for one. There's still a method that I haven't talked about, which is another method that I developed, and I put a lot of effort into this, and I'm not going to recommend that you use it. And I'll explain in just a second. So here's a video. Where also I think this is another one of you'll see there's a couple of assets that I'm going to go through that I think they're going to be okay NDA wise. So in the case of this file here, what I have set up is a single, like a normal joint type of thing, and then you have another one here where I'm talking about something called dual hinge, where I put a little extra joint. It's a third joint. It's one in the middle there. And I've made it so that it looks like a sphere. Okay, so for those of you that get squeamish with looking at an anatomy, I have put I should have a link in the description for you to be able to skip this last little bit that you're going to be seeing. I'll tell you in just a moment when to not look and then go and skip, because I'm going to show you a video. In this little video, I have another video that is an actual live, a real live, well, not live, but someone's actual knee that's been preserved, and you can actually see the motion, because knees are not like hinges on a door. So already from the get-go, if we look at this again, this might work for an elbow. Like that's a decent, if considering it's just there's no anatomy in the topology, that would allow you to have an elbow that still points. You could get it to be pointy, and that could work. And that's generally how far an arm goes. Considering the muscles in the arms and the bicep, that would work. But for a knee, it's not quite the same. It's not the same anatomy. So I'm going to show you this video now, where I'm showing. Look, I took. Okay, so I'm going to pause it here. This is a prosthetic for a knee, and it's designed to simulate the movement of a knee. So if anyone knows how that works, it's the people who made this prosthetic. And one of the things you're going to notice is it has primarily two hinges. Is the best way I can describe it. There's a ball type of shape, which will roll on this part here. There's like a surface. Now, to make a long story short, I was writing a white paper for SIGGRAPH about this, because I developed an algorithm called a dual hinge, which basically is going to do what we're going to see here, but mathematically. And to make the story short, they wanted me to to show other methods that are currently being used, and I was like, I don't know what current methods are being used for this. I haven't seen anything that talks about this, and I wouldn't be surprised if you talk to anybody about this and no one knows about this subject. That's why I'm going to try to keep it on the down low, because from the point of view, again, proposition value for my students, the value proposition of this is not great, because it's like, if no one knows about this stuff, then you're going into the workplace with knowledge that not a lot of people know, and it's not going to really help you fit in and understand how this stuff works. So, or how their systems work, because you're going to be coming in saying, oh, I know about this thing, and they're going to be like, what is that? It's not going to help you much. But if you're doing some personal stuff and eventually you're in a position where you can actually start improving the quality of your end result, you might want to consider this system. I've made the constraint available from on the Regonomicon. On the webpage with bacon strip. It's been there the whole time. It's just that I don't have an interface for it, and I'll add it later. But I really want you to understand what it is, and I'll show you an example of how I used it. And then just leave it in the back of your mind that there are better methods for knees in particular. Okay, so if you're squeamish, please, this is the moment where you should skip. Okay, while you're all doing that, okay, for the rest, let's take a look at the section here. Okay, and I'm going to rewind this so we can see this clearly. I'm going to come back. So there's this kind of a motion where it's sliding. The people from SIGGRAPH were saying there is this method where you have basically you draw a path and then you translate the bottom joint so that it makes this motion. And I'm like, that is awful. Oh, who would animate with something like that? And writing the equation for that, for positional, for something that's rotational, is not going to be great. So if we look carefully, the motion, I did the same thing that the prosthetic people did. I realized that there is basically two hinges. You look at where, like you've got this, this is a VLC. Okay, so this is basically where one hinge is, and then here would be where the other hinge is at. Okay, and just with those two things, you would be able to simulate this by having basically if you were to look at a leg as two bones, that would allow you to simulate this motion with a third bone in the middle. And that's what this is, with my own algorithm that deals with that. Now, if you're worried about what that means from the perspective of, let's say, motion capture that has two bones, I've made, or even if you're bringing this into a game engine and you need to have IK that's happening in real time because you want the feet to plant on the ground. So you have your animation that's driving the motion of your character, but then you have to adjust the leg a little bit so that it makes contact with the ground. You want to have an IK, and that IK usually comes with the prerequisite of being two bones. So by adding a third bone, you're creating a bit of an issue here. Okay, so that is the number one negative that people will have towards this system. But I made it in such a way that it's built on top of two bones. So you have your usual two bone control. So your human IK and your motion capture, everything still works. Then on top of that, you have three bones that will use this equation to figure out what the rotation values need to be in order to achieve this. And okay, so now everybody should be back. This is where the link should bring us back. So we've talked about how the anatomy of a knee works. Like, remember, Leonardo da Vinci went into the morgue and spent some time there. There was a good reason for it. Learning the anatomy by seeing this kind of stuff is actually handy. So please keep that in mind. Diagrams can help, though, to understand this. But basically what we discovered is if you wanted to recreate that real and anatomical motion in the knee, you would need two hinges, not a single hinge. It's not a door. So what I'm going to propose in this part of the video is an algorithm that works on top of the traditional 2K. So you have your 2K underneath, so it works with everything. Your human IK still works. Everything still works. And then these three bones will adapt based on the values from the two bones and give you the result of a hinge like that, a dual hinge. And this method is very close to what actually is happening in anatomy. And what I'm going to do now is we're done learning from this. So this would be good for maybe an elbow. But for a knee, if we really wanted to go crazy, I would go, and here I did it quickly. So basically, this is the same setup that we just saw before, and it's using, if I look in here, this is the constraint for dual hinge, and there's some things here that are I can probably just pack them into a button. Let me know if you really would like to see that. I can make it a button that we'd add here, which basically would allow you to just select 2 bones. You click the button and it generates the 3 bones on top. And I made it so that these are 3 bones, but I've made it so that the radius of these visual joints, like the visual is going to represent where they would make contact. Based on that video that we saw, we know that there's kind of like a sliding motion. So this radius would have to slide along this ball. And obviously this is a little too high, but again, I'm trying to preserve the intention of my student. It's okay. It just means that it's going to be a little too high, that's all. But if you look, basically you have this sliding on that ball, and it's creating and like, consider this, I did not change anything. It's the same skinning that my student had. I copy pasted it, and then I added, for the third joint that's in here, I added some influence. That's it. I didn't really do anything. And already we're starting to see that it starts to feel more like a knee. So, okay, long story short, this method is an excellent method for getting something that looks like a knee, because it's using basically the same logic, and even the math is similar to what a real knee does. And as you can see here, even something that normally would give you cup holders is still working. The volume is being preserved, and the anatomy is being preserved, more importantly. So even in a scenario like this one, this would be preferable. Now, like I said, there's kind of negatives to using the system, and I would recommend against using this from the get-go. Try to use more of a traditional system. So here's another example of how dual quaternion would not help us at all. Dual quaternion is not preserving the anatomy, so that's not a solution. Anyways, so dual hinge I would use if you really want to have something very realistic, but for the most part, with what I've already shown you, it should be easy enough to get something that looks okay, and that people you're going to work with are going to understand what you're talking about. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example, because I'm going to make a list. I'm just going to pop it up on the screen. And this list is basically the tools that you're going to have in order to be able to do the volume joints that I was talking about. So once you've got your pivots, once you've got your weights, these volume joints are what's going to actually preserve the volume. And I'm going to go through a file now real quick that is going to show you how you could get it to look right. In a specific scenario. So here's another software. This isn't Maya, but it doesn't matter because we're looking at, again, the Rigonomicon is about learning about rigging. It doesn't matter what software you're using. These methods are universal. The point is to be critical and to use, to try, in this case, where our main goal is to improve our quality and our result, and try to get it to be as anatomical as possible. Using just traditional, like the basic skeleton, ain't gonna do it. I can tell you that. All right, so if what you do here is like, all you need to do is see some key, like I always do this. I have some range of motion test. In this case, it's kind of ridiculous, but it's still going to help us out. So like, take a look at that elbow already. Let me readjust my brain so that I can use the buttons. Okay, so if you look here, I can remember this is a like if I look at the wireframe, this is meant to be a base mesh for a video game. This was supposed to be our average male, anything but average, right? This person is definitely in very good shape, but not a lot of people are in this shape. But the point here is this was our base model, and it's also the worst possibility, because muscles have a tendency of not just being squishy things, that they have rules on how they move, and they actually do pulling as well as just being affected by bones. So basically anatomy is harder on something that's muscular. So this is the reason why we made this model like this, because if we can get this character to look good, then we can transfer the skin onto any character of this body type. And there's a lot of stuff in here that can be adjusted for other body types. Like you're gonna see that there's tech here for the pecs to move, and you can use the same thing for breast. This isn't jiggle fizz. This is not what the focus of this is. This is anatomy. This is preserving volume. This is making sure things slide when they're supposed to. The body masses slide on top of other parts. Like for example, your rib cage. It's a solid mass. It shouldn't be deforming. Everything on top of it should be sliding on it, so to speak. And that's not just unique to the rib cage. Every part of the body has this kind of stuff. So if I look at this elbow, you can see that it is pointy. And if I look at it from this perspective, you don't have that bulbous effect, but you're still getting the sense of this. This could be a real elbow for someone this muscular. And the design of this allows you to be able to take more or less of the influence to other models. So you can get it more pointy or less pointy or more rounded. It depends how you want to do it. The skin weight will control that, and you can adjust that after you've transferred the skin weight. So the point here is, generally as a rule, I'd like to think of it this way. If you don't even see it and it just looks normal, you've done your job. I think that's the best litmus test that you can make to something like this, especially if you've given it some time. Like when you're doing a drawing and you look at it the next day and you go, oh my God, this is awful. That's usually a good test to see if it looks natural to you or not, or get someone else to look at it. There's all kinds of tricks. So in the case of this elbow, I remember, at one point I had something that looked, well, I don't want to, drag this through the mud. But if you have something like this, for me, that stands out a lot. And it's like, that's really not, it takes time until you start seeing where the issue is. And I think something like this is closer to reality. And you just have to look at photos of people doing these poses. And then you just verify through that. That's basically the best thing you can do until your eye fully develops for seeing issues. And when we did this, we were happy with this, and we were like, this is pretty good. This is already above and beyond what most games have, and it just needs two little bones to be able to do that, and we were happy with that. And there's some stuff that's going on for the wrist as well. So if you look at the wrist, for example, yes, we have twist bones, but we also have this little flap here, which you might think is really tiny thing, but it actually helps in preserving the volume here. And if you don't have it, it looks like the wrist got really thin, and it's just a tiny bone that's doing a blend. Again, it's a blend node. And I'll go through each one of these so that we understand that how that list on your right there, where it says twist bones and blend bones, those first three are going to be the majority of what you need in order to get your character to look okay. And I'm going to go through just a few more things here before I go into the actual skeleton. Now, if I recall, this is important. Like if you look at the pecs, they're pretty big. They're pretty big pecs from the get-go. And one of the things we were worried about is the typical thing where it ends up extending too far out because there's too much influence from the clavicle, and then it does this huge arc. And we were afraid of that because these pecs are actually quite large and square-shaped. So getting them to react nicely required a method that I would call an aim node, where it's basically something that's attached to the clavicle and that aims at a part on the rib cage. Think of it this way: it's like it looks at or aims at where the nipple was originally, and then that becomes its target, and which means that as you lift the arm, there's going to be a sliding motion, and I'll show you that in just a second. But for the most part, this allowed us to do this, and there's even a little bit of flexion on the pectoralis, so that's great. We're able to do that, especially if you look at it from the side. Like, keep in mind this motion here. It looks like it's sliding in an arc on top of the rib cage and on top of the structure that's there. And that is important because that is preserving the anatomy. These little tiny details can change the perception of your character's believability instantly. If you see something like, for example, the butt, okay, there's something I guess you could call it butt tech. I have something here that when the leg lifts, it still maintains the volume and keeps that curvature of the butt. In a lot of games and even movies, I've seen digital characters that lose. It's like as if someone just cut off a part of their butt because they lifted and it's linear skinning. And there's where dual quaternion might actually help you. It'll give you that macaroni shape that might actually help you out. But in order to fix this, all I needed was a blend node. That's it. It's just an extra thing that will remember the triangle. That's basically what it is. You're pushing outward in one direction, and that's maintaining the butt. In the case of the knee, in this scenario, I don't even have a poke. It's just a blend node that was added, and that was good enough. And it's easy to transfer that. And it gave us some poses. We tried setting the character with some poses, and when we went to see how it looks against some yoga photos, and sure enough, it held up, and we were happy with that. And the simplicity of it makes it so that it was everybody was happy. The engineers that were like, no, we're not using dual hinge, because they're like, we're not going to add that to ragdoll. As you're ragdolling, you don't have animations, so the dual hinge would have to be recreated inside the engine. And anyways, there's always negatives to dual hinge, so that's why we've already spoken about it. All right, so that's how we preserved the knee. And then another one that's interesting is the neck. So if I look here, it's a very long neck, but if you look at this rotation, quite often you don't get this clean line here. Like if you think of life drawing, that should be like you can actually see it here. It's a dark line. Like I was taught to put more emphasis on the line when you have masses overlapping each other and there's tension. So here would be a place where I would draw a thick line, because you want to accentuate that line in the anatomy because of the muscles that are being rolled. So guess what I used for this? It's a twist bone. It's a roll bone. So, and it's a single one. I could have used maybe another one to get something a little bit nicer here. This is not great, but overall, that with just a single roll bone, we're already getting a neck that's starting to feel like a neck. One other thing, look at here, like the deltoids. So if you can imagine someone putting a pencil between there, and if your brain can say, yeah, the pencil would hold because the muscle is strong enough, that is what you want. If your character does this and it's all squishy and weird, that takes away its believability. Here you're clearly seeing that it works, and this is all being done with again, just twist bones. I added a twist bone here, just like the wrist, and I added a twist bone here, and something with an aim for the mass on the back, so that it stretches out properly. So now we're going to take a look at what's under the hood. I'm going to hide the geometry, and I've color coded this so that you can see what kind of solution I'm using for which part. So anything that's like this blue color here, like teal are just twist bones, roll bones. So I added some in the leg, some for the ankle. Obviously for the wrist, I added 2. And around the shoulder, I added 1 going into the shoulder and 1 on the on top of the clavicle. These bones allow you to maintain, like what we just saw. It is very helpful for volume preservation on shoulders. The orange ones are the other most important one, which is they're just blend nodes. They're averages. So think of it this way. Look here, they're all like this bone and this bone is pretty straight, and this bone is pretty straight. And as you get that bend, it's an average of those two, simply put. And then it is weight. It's the triangle that we saw before on the straw. So the other thing that you're going to notice is I comboed it with a poke bone. So this bone is on top of the blend bone, and as the angle between these two joints start to become more acute, it pushes it that way like a piston. It pushes it away. And I'm just going to go through this really quick. There's a whole thing to talk about here. To understand how poke bone works, you need to understand something called a dot product. So some of you might feel intimidated by that. Some of you or maybe already know what that is. Basically, think of it this way. You have addition, subtraction, multiplication, division for like single numbers, right? Well, vectors have their own kind of things. A vector is just 3 numbers. right? X, Y, Z. So a position is a vector. So you have these positions in space. So you can do a dot product between two vectors. And what that basically does is it gives you how close they are to each other. If they're on top of each other, it becomes a 1. They are basically, how close is it? 100%. It's a 1. If they point away from each other completely, like complete opposite direction, it's actually -1. So it's like saying 100% not pointing at each other. And then the other one, which is kind of like somewhere in between, which is 90 degrees. It's a little bit harder to understand, but that's a 0, meaning they're not really pointing at each other, but they're not pointing away from each other. So that's a 0. And that dot product, that's it. That value right there is useful to you. You can even use it for shaders to know if you're looking, like the direction of the camera is 90 degrees to the normal on a surface, and then you can, that's what we call Fresnel. So anyways, point is, it's a very useful tool to have. A dot product can help us for so many things, but primarily the best way to visualize it in your mind is, if I have two vectors and I do a dot product, it's going to give me some information as to the nature of these two vectors and if they're overlapping each other or pointing away from each other. That's it. And then you just take that value, and in this case, I use a smoothing function, a smooth interpolation, so that it's not like too linear. It's soft in, soft out, and that is how you get the poke bone to work. It's that simple. And what I put in Maya, you'll see it's just we saw it already. I press a button, it creates the function, and then you just tweak the values to push it in any direction that you want. You can use that poke value to point in any direction. And you can control which angles it's using as a starting point and ending point to see. And that's it. That's really all a poke is. Now for the PEC, if you're interested in the PEC, these are green, right? They are aim vectors. So basically, if you were to, like, there's a starting point. Like I used to do this in the, let's see if I can select this. There we go. So if this is the starting point, this is what's parented to the shoulder. So if I pull it, you'll see that it's always aiming to that other little ball. It's just an aim vector. And if I move this moves where it aims. So how this works is very, very simple. Because this one's parented to the clavicle, as you lift with this arm, like around here, it'll continue pointing at the other thing that you've placed down below. And then that will give you a sliding motion. So you're sliding the mass upwards instead of doing an arc motion from the clavicle, which is generally what a lot of people use. And you end up with this disgusting, messy, big thing that sticks out. It's cheap, but it's cheap. So here you have another method with simple aim constraint. That's all it is. We're just trying to find solutions to anatomical issues. Another one that is like we talked about the butt. So all you're going to see is that you're going to notice I have an orange. Those are blend nodes, right? So you're going to see that I have an orange thing for each butt cheek, and that maintains the volume for each butt cheek. Now you're going to also notice that there's a crotch. And this is actually incredibly useful. And most people are not aware of how useful this is. So when you're lifting a leg or doing the splits, quite often this region, you have to make a choice between skinning 100% to the pelvis or having it stretched by one of the legs, being influenced by both legs. And that results in a very ugly skinning scenario where it just stretches everything. And this is also true for the female form. So the quality of your character's shape will improve dramatically with each one of these, and you don't need that many. I have seen more bones in a facial rig that has like the lips have more bones than all of the bones that added here for the entire body for volume preservation and anatomy preservation. So that's something to keep in mind, that you're not really adding that much. Okay, so let's finish this up. Now that we've seen a good method for this, I'm just going to go through where we left off with our work in progress. There we go. So all that to say, if I create a node like this one, and I go to this frame, we're going to finalize our rig here. So I'm going to match these two. I'm just going to close that. All I did was match it so it does that and get rid of the selection of the mesh. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see what's going on. So like that. And now I'm going to make this child of the upper leg, the thigh. And we're going to freeze this. And we're going to give this a name. We can call this knee. Or patella, whatever we want to call it. And so what we're going to do is first, we're going to set it up so before we even include it in the skin, we're going to set it up so that it has the average, the rotation average. So all we do is select this, and select this. In that order, you can use Maya's join orient system. If not, or like you can use the constraint join orient. One of my students, actually this very same student, after we used that, had an issue. My brain's readjusting to the buttons, the controls for this software. Sorry about that. So my student had a big issue where when the leg was fully extended, it would break. And that has to do with how Maya is doing its orientation math, like its rotation math. So we could use the constraint join orient like we did last time. If well, you know what? Well, we have already done it once, so we're going to use the other system this time, so I can show you how to do it. It's exactly the same thing. We're going to do a blend constraint. You have it right here. You have these three little dots now. This is a new thing that I've added. So in case you have a window, it'll tell you that it's going to open a window. And I just want to blend rotation, and we have it set up exactly the same way. And you just press apply, and it's going to create the constraint and everything. And it's actually a very optimal constraint. I won't go into too much detail there. That'll be for another video, but especially when we're going to be talking about the facial rig video. But I've added a number of tools here. So even just being able to, like for example, this one here, this one's just added. This should look familiar to you because you have translation, rotation, and scale, transforms. You may have seen that before. Basically, what this does is it not only replaces parent, point, orient, and scale and puts it into one, but it also simplifies it and optimizes it. So because you use this often and you can maintain offset the same way and all that, this is a nice tool to have that I made sure that it's available because it's using transformation matrix. It's like both of these are using transformation matrix operations, and they're safer for rotations in particular. But in the case of the join orient, even though it's using, because of the complexity of how they have it set up with basically it's reconstructing the values in order to do an average for a very specific use case, which was total overkill for the constraint, it breaks. It breaks in certain scenarios. With the one we just used, it's so simple that and clean cut to a transform matrix blend that it is safer to use. So whenever you're blending stuff, I'm going to be adding more later so that you can add as many things as you want to blend with. But for the most part, you just want to blend between two things. And this thing now is set up to have a rotation constraint and a blend so that it does an average between these two. And you're going to see if this thing had a rotation of, well, it doesn't matter. So it's doing the blend, and it should be identical to the join orient, only with safer math. And that was actually the solution for my student, to use basically this function. And now I have an interface for you to be able to use it. So keep that in mind. If something breaks with join orient, don't panic. You have this blend transform method that will get you through. Now, the last thing we're going to do is, while we're at it, I'm going to include the poke constraint. So I'm going to do poke. And we're just going to see what it does. It's going inward, so we want it to go outward. So I'm just going to select the node and go into where that is the blend. Here is the poke. So we want to go in the other direction. So we're going to push it far, and we're also going to lift up because generally that this is a knee, and this will help us. So go up, make sure you're going up and not off to the side. So basically it's going to go into this diagonal direction, more out than up, but a little bit of both. And now we're going to use that as a skin. And that's it. Well, maybe for the, we're going to change the angle. Again, you might have something different. I might set it up so that it always starts at like, should start around 30. That's where we start to lose volume. So around there, and then it starts to push and do the poke. So it doesn't move until it's gotten to that angle between these two joints. Okay. So now all we're going to do is we're going to select this and go back to being able to select meshes. And we're going to go to skin, edit influence, and because we've already done the options, we know that everything's good, and we should be able to do that. Now, if I come here, it will, okay, it'll start with that leg. If not, you can right click and you can see right here. Yeah, you can right click on any joint. So if I do select influence like that, it'll show me where that is. So we got a thigh, we got a calf. I'm just going to minimize that because we don't need much more than that. And then we have the knee, which doesn't have any effect yet. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger by pressing B and then clicking on the mesh itself. And then I'm just going to make sure I'm in something that's not just blending. And I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to start with that, with a little bit more on the side here, a little bit more there. Remember, later we can smooth that out nice and easy. So if we look here, already that's way too much, right? That's it's overdone. So we can fix this many ways. Again, with that issue, we can add a little bit of influence there and a little bit of influence there. Okay, I'm going to just do that. Okay, I'm just going crazy because now what we're going to do is blend it and smooth it out, and that should be good to go. So if I go select vertices, and I'm going to press Shift period, or Shift and the greater than sign, and that will increase my selection. It'll grow my selection, and that'll allow me to not have to switch modes or anything. I'm still in here. Weirdly enough, the knee is locked, and yeah, the weights, because there were no vertices that were applied, it was locked and allowed me to keep painting. Go figure. Those vertices, there were no vertices that were locked. So anyways, now it should be better. So if I do this, I keep flooding like that, you're going to get way too much still. So maybe we can bring in the calf. Wait, hang on a second, that one. And flood that in, and eventually we'll lose. We overdid it. And we can do it another way too if we want to. Take a little bit of both. So we're overdoing it now. So that means that we can come in here and go to the bacon poke and reduce the value until it's to our liking. So this, actually, I'm going to show you a really neat trick. Like, this is happening down here. This is happening because like we're a little bit too high up, but I'm going to show you how to even fix that, even though we're not at a place where we should be. So I'm just going to do this kind of thing. Okay, so that's good enough for the top part. That looks good. Now we just got to get this straightened out a little bit. We're actually going to use linear skinning to our advantage. Like, the issue with linear skinning can be used to your advantage. So if, like right now, we have too much mass coming out here, so we can use skinning from the other bone here to make it lose its weight. So basically, look at that. We're actually using it to our advantage. So just by doing this and a little bit here, I should have been on something other than 1. You get the idea. Now that's getting pretty straight. I should be able to, once again, go to smooth and then clean that up like so. We can then make the back of the calf a little stronger, and we should be like, it's funny how we're actually like, I'm going to paint correctly instead of using smoothing, and come on, and that should be pretty straight. Eventually you'll get it so that it's nice and straight, and then you can smooth it out a little bit. But take a look at that. We fixed that by using actual skinning to our advantage, linear skin to our advantage. So to get this to be nice and a lot tighter, all you have to do is go to the one that it should be tight and paint as much as you can. Over here, we definitely have a problem here. That's going to need to be cleaned up. The thigh is way too strong there. Maybe we're going to have to do some, like maybe go in here and let's see if this, you select and then shift click on the other one. The loops here are working against us. So maybe here, this one might work. Yeah, here we go. So all I did was click on one and then shift double click on another one, and it gives you a loop. And then you can just use the grobe tool, and that's going to bring that out. And then maybe we could deselect some vertices here. There's a couple of loose verts here and there that we need to work out, and this could be blended at this point to work a little bit better and keep that nice little overlap that we have there, and then maybe grow it some more. And flood a little bit. And yeah, this is the kind of work that you would do. Take some time to do it and fix up the knee a little bit here, a little bit too pointy. So it's not a nice problem to have. We're starting to get to the point where, yeah, this would be, it'd be nice. It's too bad we overdid the other part. Let's see here. So something like this, and bring that down. We lost a little bit of the work that we did before, and we could do something like that. Okay, because I want to leave this video in a good place. That is a very meaty leg with a little bit of skinning, smoothing. There we go. So I think we're almost done here. Just by smoothing it out a little bit here and there, we could probably get to the place we want to be. Okay, so leaving it there, we can clearly see that we have dealt with the volume issue. And in the case of this one, we're like, there's a couple of frames here I don't like, but like here, I don't like it, but this is related to the fact that we're just a little high. So that's easy to fix if we just have to move this down a little bit and then adjust the skinning to match the lower alignment. But you can see that we went from cup holders to a knee that's not too bad, especially on certain frames. Like this frame here now doesn't look half bad. This is not bad at all. We just have the in-between frames where it doesn't look great. And if you wanted to be really tricky, you could put a negative poke bone here and then just get this to, during these frames, to go in the other direction. I would recommend against putting too many poke bones everywhere, because one of the other things you could do here is, on any leg, is you put a poke bone here, and it measures when the calf makes contact with the thigh and then pushes the thigh upwards. Or outwards, depending if you want to make it squishy or not. You have one go in one direction, one go in the other direction, and it's going to basically be able to move it up and to the sides, which is what the mass on a thigh would do. Okay, so keeping in mind everything I just mentioned, that we prioritize moving the pivots, we change our skin weights, and then we can add any one of these solutions to improve our end result. We can improve our anatomy and preserve our volume, even with linear skinning. Hopefully this has helped you, and let me know in the comments if you feel that something needs to be explained in another video, or if you really absolutely want to have that dual hinge. By all means, I'll be more than happy to show you how to activate it, and I'll make a button for it. But just keep in mind what I mentioned before. All right, so that's it. I hope that helps.